Hey guys, what's up? It's Alex here. Welcome back to another F1 video. Today it's part 3 of the abandoned Formula 1 track series here on this channel. So you guys keep suggesting tracks for me to include in this series, so I'm just going to keep going ahead with this series until we eventually will run out. That's inevitable. But yes, so thanks to you guys that have been suggesting stuff for this video series. I really appreciate it. But let's jump into the first one in this one, which a lot of people have been talking about. Why is it not in part 1? Why is it not in part 2? Well, it's in part 3. It's Istanbul. This track was launched in 2005, and this was the first track to ever host a Turkish Grand Prix. The first race was in that 2005 season, and the then Mercedes driver, or McLaren Mercedes driver I should say, Kimi Räikkönen won that race. This track was built on the Asian side of Istanbul, and it's actually quite near an international airport, which was obviously fantastic for fans around the world trying to get to this track. It's actually had a massive spectator capacity, this track, of over 125,000, however only 25,000 of those were seated. A lot of people believe that this is one of the best tracks ever designed by Hermann Tilke, and I'm in that category as well. Even though I don't like a lot of Hermann Tilke's tracks, some of them are fantastic, some of them are meh, and some of them aren't that great at all. I think this definitely goes up there, some of the, one of the few fantastic tracks designed by Hermann Tilke, and yeah, a lot of people are very disappointed it's no longer on the calendar. Turn 8, however, became one of the most famous corners in Formula 1. That's just because of just its high-speed nature, seeing cars on the absolute limit. However, the track wasn't without criticism. Jenson Button criticised the track, saying over the weekend the track was evolving and getting bumpier and bumpier as the weekend went on, which meant by the end of the Grand Prix on Sunday, it was really different to how it was on Saturday and Friday, meaning it was very hard to understand the car. And we also had Jarno Trulli. He said that the track was very easy to learn. Okay, but he also said that this track was mostly down to the car and not much to do with the driver. I guess that makes sense if he's saying the track is easy to learn. Unfortunately, due to financial disagreements, this track was last used in Formula 1 in 2011, and from my research I can't see any other race events that have been particularly taking part here since. So I completely understand why you guys have been sort of harassing me to get this track in the series, because in my opinion, and most of your guys' opinion, this is one of the most recent tracks in Formula 1 that should totally be on the calendar here today. I think there have been so many people sort of lobbying to get this track back on the calendar, and I think there have been talks to try and get it back on the calendar over the last couple of years, but unfortunately, they run into financial difficulties back in 2011, or I guess disagreements is probably what they said here, but you know what I mean. I'm assuming one side or the other wanted more money than they were getting, and they just couldn't find a meeting point, which is always sad. I mean, Formula 1 should be about the fans, not about making billions and billions of pounds. I mean, I understand obviously people have to make their money in certain areas, but maybe if one of these sides, I don't know which side it was a little bit less greedy, maybe we'd still see the Turkish Grand Prix held in Istanbul, which would be fantastic. I think there's so many fans, F1 fans in Turkey, so many fans around the world that would travel to go and see this event. Even myself, I'd love to go there and see a Grand Prix, but right now I don't think it's being used, which is really unfortunate considering the history it did have over its 6 or 7 years in the sport. A lot of people love the track. Next up is Brooklyn. So we're sort of going from one of the newer abandoned tracks to one of the oldest abandoned tracks in Formula 1. This is a track based in England, in Surrey, and one I've actually visited myself, and it's just esteemed in F1 history, even or Grand Prix history. It wasn't named Formula 1 back then, but it's got so much history, and I'll talk briefly through it right now. So this is a 2.75 mile track based in Surrey in the United Kingdom, as I previously mentioned. This track was opened in 1907, so over 100 years ago, and it's the world's first purpose-built motorsport track, which is pretty crazy. Grand Prix racing started here in 1926 after extensive repairs were made to the track in 1920. That was after World War I obliterated the site. The first British Grand Prix was won by Louis Wagner and Robert Senecal, probably pronounced wrong. They were racing or sharing a Delage 155B. When World War II broke out in 1939, racing understandably stopped at the track. After World War II, there were attempts to try and race there once again, but that track was sold, and nowadays is mostly used for aircraft, storing aircraft, I think even building aircraft in the time between. And there's currently a museum there, and parts of the track are still stand in somewhat decent condition. And I'd say, if you've got the opportunity, if you're visiting England, you love motorsport, and you're trying to think of places to go to Brooklyn. It's based in Surrey. I don't think it's that far away from Silverstone. It's not going to be right next to it, but it's not too far from Silverstone if you want to have a bit of a day out. Maybe you can go and visit the visitor centre at Brooklands. I definitely recommend it. I've been there multiple times and I absolutely love it each time I go. As I said, it's esteemed in history and there's so many fantastic things to do there. There's also a Mercedes-Benz world there as well, the location, which is pretty interesting as well. I think you can do like driving experiences there, which is a pretty cool experience if you do want to do that as well. And a lot of you might know about this track as well through James May's Toy Story series on BBC a couple of years ago. I think it was actually quite a long time ago actually now, probably like 2009, 2010, I think that was on TV. But basically what they did is they tried to recreate the Brooklands track with scale electric cars and race around it. It's an absolutely fantastic series and a fantastic episode, so I definitely recommend you guys go and watch that if you can find it, whichever way you can. So as I said, this is a fantastic track, and it was a sort of an oval, but unfortunately nowadays it's sort of been turned into housing. As I said, aircraft storage I think's there as well. I think they actually made airplanes there. I could be completely wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they might have made airplanes in the time from when it was shut to sort of nowadays. And I think most recently it's sort of developed into housing and other companies are based there as well. So unfortunately there's not much motorsport and of the much of the motorsport track left, but there are parts of it there which I think you can still go and stand on today. It's crazy, some really tilted bankings. I mean, I don't even know what the degree is, but it's pretty hard to walk up. So yeah, I definitely would recommend going there, even if it's just as a visitor. I don't think you can particularly drive on it, unfortunately, but nonetheless, a fantastic track, and unfortunately it wouldn't really work with modern day Formula 1, but back then it was definitely sort of part of the F1 history, which it was sad to see it go. So another track you guys told me to talk about in these videos is the old part of Spa. Now Spa didn't just start off with the Spa we know today. There are many carnations of this track, and we'll talk about the early reincarnations of this track right now. So the old Spa layout was designed in 1920. It was actually originally named, I think, the Tricky Triangle, and it was actually raced on public roads. The first car race was held in 1922, and in 1924, the first 24-hour race, the Spa 24 Hours. It's a synonymous race in world motorsport. Loads of people know about it, but that was first held in 1924. The first F1 race was started in 1925. Based in the countryside, the old circuit was very dangerous, and most of the track was pretty much flat out at 180 miles an hour plus. The old version of Spa was known for its fatal accidents, and over the years more and more drivers were getting concerned about the track and its layout and the safety of its drivers. And actually in 1969 the drivers boycotted the Grand Prix because of the danger, and it didn't really repair its reputation. 10 years later, in 1979, the old layout was abandoned. You can still drive this on today's roads actually. It's still public road, which is really interesting to note if you want to go and visit this for yourself. So we know Spa is the longest track on the current modern Formula 1 calendar as well, but back then it was much longer. You guys would have seen from the pictures in the video I would have put on the screen, it was a much longer track back in the day, and it's understandable why they had to update this track. I mean, if you look back at it, you know, look back at what it was then. Go and look at some racing game videos of it. I mean, it's on modern day racing games, parts of this track, the old layout, and it's very scary. I've tried driving it myself and like, oh my goodness, I would never want to even drive a normal car really on those roads sometimes, even at like flat out speed. It would be very scary. So very understandable why the drivers boycotted the Grand Prix. Unfortunately, there were a lot of fatal accidents at this Grand Prix, understandably through its very high speed nature and the safety of the cars not being as great as they were back then. So yeah, as we said, in 1979 it was sort of boycotted completely and abandoned, and we never went back to that part of the track. But we will love and know that the recent sort of reincarnation of Spa is a fantastic track still. So even though it doesn't have the history of the old track, we still have some part of the history of the modern day track, which is still fantastic. So old Spa, slightly left to abandon, like in terms of a racing circuit type of thing, but in terms of public roads, still available to go out there and drive, from my knowledge, if you want to yourself. So next up, we're going to talk about the Buddha International Circuit, and this was actually the Indian Grand Prix track from 2011 to 2013, if I remember correctly. And that's actually didn't go much further, as you understand. That was actually due to some, I think, financial issues or financial difficulties, meaning that they didn't want to continue there in India. This track cost $460 million to complete and had a capacity of 120,000 people. It was unveiled late in 2011 and went on to hold the Grand Prix in 2011, 2012 and 2013. Sebastian Vettel would go on to win all three races at the venue. Formula 1 racing was suspended in 2013, however, and no international racing series had happened at the track since 2014. The use of the track was stopped due to a tax dispute with the Uttar Pradesh. Please apologise if that's wrong. I really apologise if that's wrong. The Uttar Pradesh government, a tax dispute with them and the FIA meant that they stopped racing there. It was only set on a 1-year absence from the sport, but it never did come back. As I said, these tax disputes would continue to go on between the FIA and the government, but nothing would ever be sorted in terms of getting the Indian Grand Prix back on the modern day Formula 1 calendar. They have kept trying to bring it back. There are rumours that this track could be back on the calendar for the 2019 season or possibly the 2020 season. I think it'd be fantastic personally to see this track back on the calendar, just because there are so many fans, F1 fans in India, car fans in India, and it would be great for them to get a track back in their country, and I think they deserve it. I think it was actually a really, really good track. A lot of people enjoyed driving it. I personally didn't really enjoy it on the F1 games, but it was enjoyed by many. However, this track is still somewhat used on track days and smaller events, but a lot of the surrounding buildings and all of the infrastructure for the Grand Prix have sort of been left, I guess, slightly be abandoned. I mean, a lot of the infrastructure that was there for the F1, of course, doesn't need to be used when they're using sort of for club days or for smaller events like truck racing, which I've seen happen around India. So now we're going to move on to another classic track, and this is actually called the Solitude Racing Track. Solitude. You guys know I'm not very good with my pronunciations, but this is basically based in Germany. So as previously mentioned, this is based in Germany, just west of Stuttgart, and this track became famous because it held bike and car racing in the early 1900s. In the early 1900s, this track started as a hill climb track and evolved over time into a 22-kilometre racetrack, which was founded in 1925. The track was shortened in 1931, and its final variation of the track was laid in 1935. Formula 1 would go on there to race on 4 occasions in 1961, 1962, 1963 and 1964. And of these 4 Grand Prix, they all had 4 different winners. The 4 winners were Innes Ireland, Dan Gurney, Jack Brabham and Jim Clark. So some very, very big names in F1 motorsport history there, winning this Grand Prix back in the 60s. However, no race events are held here anymore, but the track is still kept in sort of good condition because they now hold some sort of classic events here, the Solitude Revival, the Retro Revival, Classic Culture, and basically, yeah, you get to see some era racing cars at the track they would have raced on back in the day. So you get to see some really cool cars from their eras, 1960s, 1970s. So some really, really nice cars you can go and see there. I'm not sure this is a yearly thing or it's just a couple of one-off events, but if you're in the area in Germany, it might be interesting to see whether you can go and see some classic cars on a very historic track in motorsport history. So there we are then, guys. Thanks for watching this episode once again. I really enjoy doing the research into these videos, and it's always fantastic to learn about tracks I didn't even know existed, and obviously way before my time, like the Solitude track for example, and learning a bit more about Brooklands, which I have visited in the past, is always really interesting. So yeah, thanks again for you guys for supporting this series. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks to everyone that left comments and helped me out pushing this series forward and getting new ideas in terms of tracks and suggestions, that sort of stuff. Thank you very much. And of course, I would like to do a couple more episodes. I have got a couple more episodes of this actually planned. I've gone back and actually found quite a few really good comments. So I might actually have at least 2 more episodes of this series going up on this channel. So hopefully you guys aren't too bored of it. But yeah, from the last couple of episodes, you guys are still really enjoying this series. So thanks once again. I really appreciate it. And hopefully you guys will enjoy this episode and the episodes to come, which I think should be really interesting as well. So that's pretty much it for the video. But I do want to quickly talk about a couple of things. So I understand if you skip away right now, but I'd really appreciate if you just stick around just to hear me out on a couple of things. So as I've seen over the last couple of months, my channel started to sort of grow again, which is really fantastic. I really appreciate that. It's nice to see you guys are enjoying the new content I'm coming out with. New documentaries and stuff like that are on the way, but they're not the sort of things I can just magic out of the air. I mean, videos like this are simpler. They're not very, very simple, but they're simpler to do than a documentary, for example. But documentaries are coming, so if you have any ideas or suggestions about documentaries or topics you'd like me to suggest and talk about in these videos, feel free. The comment section's always down there for any sort of opinions, even if it's just a way out there thought, a way out there opinion. I'm always up for listening and thinking of new ideas, and stuff like that is always something I like to do. And yeah, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to you guys who have been supporting the channel over the last couple of weeks, especially. I think since that first episode of the Abandoned F1 Track series is sort of blown up somewhat, it's over like 120,000 views, which once again, thank you so much. I never would have expected that. But yeah, that video definitely blew up out of any proportion expected. So thank you once again. Hopefully you do enjoy these sort of videos. But yeah, I appreciate all the new guys that have come to the channel, all the new guys, the old guys that have stuck around. And of course, if you have any ideas about what's good and bad about these videos, please always feel free to share them. I'm not going to be offended if you say that part's crap, that part's really good, because that's how I learn and that's how I make these videos better. And I think definitely over the last couple of months you guys have been more honest with me, I've been more honest with you, and I think we're making some better content, which is always fantastic. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this whole video, and I've rambled a little bit, as I always do at the end of these videos. Just to let you know, I've got 2 interviews coming up soon. 2 interviews with 2 really big names in motorsport. The one you guys will probably know the most is Sebastian Loeb. I got to interview Sebastian Loeb, which is absolutely incredible. I mean, I never would have expected that in my life, that I got to speak to the most successful rally car driver ever. So yeah, I appreciate the opportunity from the World Rallycross guys for inviting me out. I also interviewed a superstar in the World Rallycross, which is Andreas Backerund. He drove for Ken Block's team for the last couple of years and now is racing alongside Matthias Ekstrom and his team. So yeah, big names all over the place in these videos, but I'm just absolutely privileged and honoured to actually be able to speak to these guys, and thank you to you guys for helping me, put me in this opportunity, put me in the place to be invited to these events. Once again, I really appreciate it, and thanks for just basically making my dream come true, because I changed my idea of my content. I was bored with gaming. I didn't really enjoy it that much, so I evolved my content, changed up my content, and my channel has started to grow again, and you guys are really enjoying it. I'm getting this access which I never got when I was doing gaming videos, so just once again, thank you. I really appreciate it, and it might not mean a lot because you might be like, he's just saying that, he doesn't really mean it, but honestly, yeah, I spend a lot of time on these videos, but it's definitely worth it when I see you guys, all the nice comments, that sort of stuff, and it's great to see the channel evolving and moving on, which is always fantastic. So thanks again. Sorry I've rambled on. It always happens. But have a great day, guys. Yeah, I've definitely spoke too much. Have a great day, guys, and I'll see you guys around soon. I will hopefully get those 2 interviews up soon. Goodbye.